Ophir, 3 months. Thank you for the 3 months, Ophir. Very nice of you. Are there any champions you would benefit from getting a power? Feels good to play in solo queue agency chain, like the one that Swain got. That subject is interesting to me because it's like, how to say it? There's a lot of champions who have very high win rates and are dissatisfying that could potentially benefit from that. But the question to me at the back of my head whenever I see that question is like, is the game better when more champions are closer to 50% win rate? And the way they're doing that is because we've given them more agency and more to feel satisfying. And the answer could be yes. But it's kind of a thing where it's like, you could buff Garen by giving him stats, or you could buff Garen by giving him agency. Agency meaning like outplay potential, the ability to be like, in this situation, I can be better than you if I do these certain things, right? And I am personally not convinced that certain characters would be better off for the game or for their players by moving them towards 50% win rates while giving them more agency. Certain characters most certainly would. There's certain characters who definitely are critically unsatisfying and need some adjustments. But I think other characters are supposed to be kind of like simple, straightforward, not as much outplay potential. And for those characters, I would worry about pushing them towards a balanced strategy that requires them to be lower, that lowers their win rate while increasing their satisfaction. Just because, that's a slippery slope of like, now everybody's like, say dashing around, for example. And it's not bad to dash around, but it's like, it's kind of a question of how do you balance a character that dashes around and feels satisfying versus a character who doesn't? And you can balance the non-dashers to feel very satisfying, but sometimes they might need more raw power to the account for the fact that they can't just outplay a lot of situations. But overall, I'd say like stuff like Swain is definitely good. Like I don't think like it was wrong to do work on like that on Swain. I think he definitely needed it. It's just, again, it's a question of, hey, should we do this to everybody? Should everybody just be lower win rate on average? And higher agency and higher satisfaction at lower win rates. And I think League probably wants some number of characters who are fairly straightforward to play, which probably means that they're, in many situations, lower agency, and then probably means that the way they're satisfying is their baseline power is just a bit higher to account for the fact that you might not be able to outplay on them as much. People often say Jhin is fair and Viego is 200 years, but personally I have no problem with Viego, and when I become president, my first executive order will be delete Jhin. How do you define fairness? So fairness is often a perception gained by playing against something. So what I mean by this is, I think a lot of ways, one of the ways to interpret how a player might perceive fairness is to be like, okay, how do they feel after the game, right? So as an example, if you go into a game and you fight against, say, Nidalee, and then at the end of the game you come out of it and you're like, okay, I got destroyed by her, but here's what I'm gonna do next time, right? That probably has left you with a feeling of some degree of fairness, because you're like, oh, yeah, she did all these things, yeah, I got wrecked, but here's my plan, right? And so I think one of the ways that a player might think about fairness or interpret fairness is that the game leaves you with a sense of the losing games leave you with a sense of being able to succeed in the future, or like something to try, things like that. Where on the flip side of things, characters that can often feel very unfair is when you play against them and you come out of that game being like, I don't know what I was supposed to do, I don't know what the weaknesses were, and therefore this character is unfair. This is why giga nerfing a character, making them really weak, can sometimes be an effective strategy for lowering ban rate. And the reason is if there's a character that's very overpowered such that it feels deeply unfair because it's overpowered, Like, let's say Viego comes out and he's just OP, and you constantly see him pentakilling people, right? You're going to probably think he's unfair. It's like, and I tried to kill him, but then he got the reset, and it's crazy. So you're overall like experiencing him in that case, but he's unfair. But then imagine we nerf Viego to like 40% win rate. And then he spends like 2 months just walking around, failing at every turn because he's so incredibly weak, right? What that's going to create in terms of perception for the people playing against him is they'll start seeing how he fails because he's weak, right? And so they'll be like, oh, at 40%, actually this guy's really reliant on a kill, and I know how to stop him from getting it. And at 40%, this guy's really squishy, and so I'm going to like burst him down, right? And then if we rebuff him, like that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stay being unfair, but like stay being fair, that is. But like it's kind of an idea that people's perception of fairness also comes from experience, which means that you tend to see characters get less frustrating over time. And one of the reasons that is because the more you play against something, the more you understand it and the more it feels fair. So as an example of this, when I played Valorant, for those of you who don't know, there's a character called Raze in Valorant. And Raze, especially when she came out, she could do some pretty crazy things that other characters in Valorant couldn't really do. One of the things she can do is she can like satchel jump. It's like the equivalent of soldier rocket jumping in Team Fortress 2, and just freaking land on your head with a shotgun and Goomba stomp you. And that's pretty wild. And then her ultimate's a rocket, where she can just shoot it at you and you die. And then she has these grenades that if you stand next to them, you die. And so when Raze came out, I as a player, when I played against her, I was like, this character is deeply unfair. And to be fair, she was very powerful. She got nerfed a number of times. But that was like a first game feeling. The first game I played against Raze, I was like, she's Goomba stomping me from the sky. She's throwing these grenades and they just kill me. I can't avoid the rocket launcher. But then eventually, as I played against Raze more and more and more, I started getting used to the things she was doing. I'd hear her cast her satchel charges and I'd be like, oh, she's going to try to Goomba stomp me. And then I'd look up and shoot her when she's in the air because I have really good aim and I'm a very talented player, right? And then, I'd hear the rocket coming and I'd be like, okay, I've actually got more of a feel for what the AoE is here and how I could potentially like leave or dodge it or try to trade her when she tries to shoot it. And I realized, oh, when these grenades end up on top of me, my play is not to stand on top of them and die, it is to try to run away, right? And so I'm not going to say that made her perfectly balanced, but what I'm getting at is just by playing against the character Raze, I went as a player from feeling like she was unfair to feeling like she was just really strong, just by like experiencing the character and over a number of games learning what I was supposed to do against her. And so that's the thing that I think applies to a lot of games. It's just like once you play against something, especially if you see it failing, it's a lot easier to then be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do even in the situations where it might be winning.